Hello everyone, and welcome back to Rules as Written Character Builds. My name is Zach, and on this channel I make character builds for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, trying to strike a balance between theme and combat capability. I'm starting a new campaign tonight, so I wanted to use this week's upload as a chance to go through the character that I'm going to be playing. This is a build that I've been brewing since I started doing the Ranger video last year, but I decided that the multi-class would work better as a fighter, so I went ahead and changed the Ranger, made that into the Witcher, and this week I'm doing the Plague Knight, which is going to combine the Circle of Spores Druid with a Battlemaster fighter. This is going to be taking advantage of the Circle of Spores feature's symbiotic entity, which adds extra necrotic damage on hit. The goal here is to make as many attacks as possible, capitalizing on that extra on-hit damage, while also building in some defenses to try and preserve the temporary hit points from symbiotic entity, since we only get that extra damage while the hit points are up. So yeah, that's the Plague Knight. Let's dive in. With these videos, I try to focus only on features that either play into the character fantasy or are necessary for the mechanical play of the build. For this reason, you'll often see me skip over class features. That's just me trying to stay on course and keep these videos to a reasonable length. So for our species this week, we're going to be going with Goliath. So this is going to give us extra movement speed, extra carrying capacity, the ability to turn large once per long rest. These are all nice, but what we're really here for is the giant ancestry feature. And for this one, we're taking Stone's Endurance. When you take damage, you can take a reaction to roll 1d12. Add your Constitution modifier to the number rolled and reduce the damage by that total. You can use this benefit a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. This is going to go a long way in protecting our pool of temporary hit points that I mentioned. For our ability scores, we're going to prioritize Dexterity and Constitution. This will come out to a Strength of 12, a Dexterity of 15, a Constitution of 15, an Intelligence of 8, Wisdom of 13, and Charisma of 8. I would have loved to do a Strength build for this one, but it's much more effective with Dexterity. However, we do still have a +1 in our Strength, and we have the powerful build feature from Goliath, so we can still lift and carry more than most other characters that we're going to encounter. For our background, we're going with Mercenary Veteran. Once again, this is not a 2024 Player's Handbook background, which means we get to choose our own ability score increases and origin feat. For our ability scores, we're increasing our Dexterity by +2 and our Constitution by +1, for a total of 17 and 16 respectively. Origin feat, we're taking Magic Initiate Cleric, making Wisdom our spellcasting modifier. Take the Spare the Dying and Toll the Dead cantrips, and for the first level spell, grab Shield of Faith. Since we're dual wielding and wearing medium armor, our armor class isn't the best, so this spell is going to help bring it up a little bit. Using Scale Mail and the Shield of Faith spell, we'll be able to have an 18 armor class. And eventually, if we find some half plate, we'll get up to 19. Plus, as a fighter, we do have proficiency in Constitution saving throws, so that's going to go a long way in keeping that concentration up. Let's take a look at our roadmap for the build. We're going to start off with 1 level in Fighter. Then, for levels 2 through 5, we're going to go with Druid 1 through 4. 6 through 10 is going to be Fighter levels 2 through 6. 11 through 13 will be Druid levels 5 through 7. Then 14 through 19 will be Fighter levels 7 through 12. And finally, we'll end off at level 20 with Druid level 8. Starting off with Fighter 1, we're going to get a Fighting Style, Weapon Mastery, and the Second Wind feature. For the Fighting Style, take 2 Weapon Fighting, which lets us add our ability modifier to the additional attack we make from attacking with weapons that have the light property. Fighter gets the most Weapon Masteries of any class, 3. We're going to be dual wielding, so take Mastery with the Short Sword and the Scimitar, then take whatever you want for the 3rd. We are going to have some spells for ranged options, but feel free to pick up like a bow or a crossbow for that 3rd mastery, since our dex is much better than our wisdom. Short swords are going to use the Vex property. If you hit a creature with this weapon and deal damage to the creature, you have advantage on your next attack roll against that creature before the end of your next turn. Then our 2nd weapon, Scimitar, will use the Nick property. When you make the extra attack of the light property, you can make it as part of the attack action instead of as a bonus action. You can make this extra attack only once per turn. These 2 properties pair together to create a nice little combo where you can attack twice with your action, and if the first attack hits, the second attack has advantage. Lastly, we get Second Wind from Fighter level 1. You can use a bonus action to regain hit points equal to 1d10 plus your fighter level. You can use this feature twice. You regain 1 expended use when you finish a short rest, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. So here we are at level 1. We're already a pretty solid melee combatant. We can make 2 attacks per turn thanks to our Nick Mastery. With our bonus action, we can cast Shield of Faith to raise our armor class up to 18. When we take damage, we can reduce it as a reaction, twice per long rest with Stone's Endurance, and when we get low on hit points, we can heal as a bonus action thanks to Second Wind. Now let's take some Druid levels to secure our subclass and get an ability score improvement. Druid levels 1 through 4, we're going to pick up Spellcasting, Wild Shape, Circle of Spores, and an ability score improvement. So as soon as we get into Druid, we get spellcasting, giving us 2 first level spell slots. This is mainly going to be used to cast Shield of Faith more often, but also don't be afraid to use those good Druid spells. I mean, Cure Wounds, Fog Cloud, Good Berry, Protection from Evil and Good is really great for us, but there is one first level spell that we should absolutely use, and that is Absorb Elements. This spell casts with a reaction, which we can take after taking acid, cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage. The spell gives us resistance to the triggering damage type until the start of our next turn. Additionally, the first melee attack that we make on our next turn deals 1d6 extra damage of the triggering type. So we're all about damage reduction with this character. So resistance to an elemental damage type for an entire round is really great to have. The extra d6 damage also increases by 1d6 for each spell slot level above first, so you can upcast this if you're out of first level spell slots. Druid level 2 gets us Wild Shape. I don't really see this character as one that wild shapes super often. We'll mainly use these charges for our subclass feature, which we get next level. We start with 2 charges, we get 1 back on a short rest, and we get all of them back on a long rest. At Druid level 3, we're going to get second level spells. Pick up Enlarge, Reduce. We are a Goliath, so enlarging ourselves is pretty on brand. Plus the extra 1d4 damage on each of our attacks is going to be pretty nice for a dual-wielding character. At this level, we also finally get our Druid subclass, Circle of Spores. Right out the gate, this gives us 2 features. Halo of Spores. Starting at 3rd level, you are surrounded by invisible necrotic spores that are harmless until you unleash them on a creature nearby. When a creature you can see moves into a space within 10 feet of you, or starts its turn there, you can use your reaction to deal 1d4 necrotic damage to that creature, unless it succeeds on a Constitution saving throw against your spell save DC. The necrotic damage increases to 1d6 at 6th level, 1d8 at 10th level, and 1d10 at 14th level. So our reaction's pretty loaded right now thanks to Stone's Endurance and Absorb Elements. Plus, with our low wisdom, it's going to be pretty easy for them to pass that saving throw, but more features is never a bad thing, and this one doesn't have any charges, so we can just throw this out all day long. But the main thing that we're here for is Symbiotic Entity. As an action, you can expend a use of your Wild Shape feature to awaken your spores, rather than transforming into a beast form. And you gain 4 temporary hit points for each level you have in this class. While this feature is active, you gain the following benefits. When you deal your Halo of Spores damage, roll the damage die a second time and add it to the total. Your melee weapon attacks deal an extra 1d6 necrotic damage to any target they hit. These benefits last for 10 minutes until you lose all these temporary hit points or until you use your Wild Shape again. So this feature is both extra hit points and extra damage all rolled into one. The temp HP that we're going to get at this level is 12. So this is roughly a third of our hit points. The extra 1d6 necrotic damage on our 2 melee attacks is going to be really nice, but we only get it while we preserve those temporary hit points. So that's why we have Stone's Endurance and Absorb Elements to reduce the damage we take, and Shield of Faith to increase our armor class. Druid level 4 gets us an ability score improvement. We're going to take the Defensive Duelist feat. Increase your dexterity score by 1 to a maximum of 20. If you're holding a finesse weapon and another creature hits you with a melee attack, you can take a reaction to add your proficiency bonus to your armor class, potentially causing the attack to miss you. You gain this bonus to your armor class against melee attacks until the start of your next turn. The best way to preserve hit points is to not get hit at all. With our scale mail armor, Shield of Faith, and this reaction, we can bring our armor class up to 21. This is admittedly a lot of reaction abilities on one character, but unlike Stone's Endurance and Absorb Elements, this feature does not require resources, so we can use it infinitely. The way I see it, Defensive Duelist is for melee attacks, Absorb Elements is for elemental damage, usually area of effects, fireballs, cone of cold, stuff like that, and Stone's Endurance is for everything else. This is also character level 5, meaning we now unlock our Goliath feature, Large Form. This lets us become large if we aren't already. Combine this with Enlarge Reduce, and we can become huge. Now, here's the thing. Large Form has no effect on us if we are already large, so make sure to use it first, and then cast Enlarge Reduce. The nice thing is that Large Form uses a bonus action, and Enlarge Reduce casts an action. So you can activate both of these abilities on the same turn. So that's it for Druid for now. We've gotten our temp HP and our necrotic damage, plus a healthy stack of spell slots to spend on Shield of Faith, Absorb Elements, and Enlarge Reduce. Let's go back to Fighter to get our subclass, extra attack, and some ability score improvements. Fighter levels 2 through 6 is going to be Action Surge, the Battlemaster subclass, an ability score improvement, extra attack, and another ability score improvement. Of course we love Action Surge, use it for an extra action in a turn. Just remember that the additional action from Nick can only be used once per turn. So while we do get 2 attacks on our action right now, if we action Surge, we're only going to get 1 more attack out of that for a total of 3. Fighter level 3, character level 7 gets us our subclass, and we're going with the much lauded and admittedly extremely fun Battlemaster. This gives us 4 superiority die, which we can spend on maneuvers. At this level, we know 3 maneuvers. We learn another one at fighters level 7, 10, and 15. These dice are d8s, and you regain all expended uses on a short rest. There is an entire page of great maneuvers in the player's handbook. For this build, I have my eye on 3 in particular: disarming attack, precision attack, and riposte. For disarming attack, when you hit a creature with an attack roll, you can expend 1 superiority die to attempt to disarm the target. Add the superiority die to the attack's damage roll. The target must succeed on a strength saving throw or drop 1 object of your choice that it's holding, with the object landing in the creature's space. This one is super useful, whether you're knocking a weapon or a spellcasting focus out of an opponent's hands, and with your object interaction, you can even pick it up on that same turn if you have a free hand to prevent them from using it. Precision attack. When you miss with an attack roll, you can expend 1 superiority die. Roll that die and add it to the attack roll, potentially causing the attack to hit. It's a bummer that this one doesn't increase the damage of the attack, but with the extra on-hit damage of this build, it really pays to make sure that those attacks land. Plus, this one goes with the Vex Mastery property, because if we make sure that that first attack hits, we'll be granting advantage to our second attack. Riposte. When a creature misses you with a melee attack, you can take a reaction and expend 1 superiority die to make a melee attack roll with a weapon or unarmed strike against the creature. If you hit, add the superiority die to the attack's damage. Another reaction feature, which we have quite a lot of in this build. However, with the amount of damage that we're going to be doing per hit, right now it's 2d6, it's going to get even more down the line. We definitely want to fit in another attack into our round of combat. So if we're fighting somebody and they miss us, throw this one out there for some great damage. Now, fighter level 4, character level 8 gets us another ability score improvement. And since we had to put off extra attack for so long, I say we take dual wielder at this level. Increase your strength or dexterity score by 1 to a maximum of 20. When you take the attack action on your turn and attack with a weapon that has the light property, you can make 1 extra attack as a bonus action later on the same turn with a different weapon, which must be a melee weapon, which lacks the two-handed property. You don't add your ability modifier to the extra attack's damage unless that modifier is negative. Thanks to this feat, we are now making 3 attacks per turn, 2 with our action and 1 with our bonus action. Each one of these is going to be benefiting from Symbiotic Entity, and potentially as well Enlarge Reduce for 2d6 and 1d4 plus 4. So this feat also brings our dexterity up to 19. Fighter level 5 gets us extra attack, meaning we can now make 3 attacks on our action for a total of 4, including our bonus action. Fighter level 6 brings us another ability score increase. We're going to grab Medium Armor Master to increase our armor class. Increase your strength or dexterity score by 1 to a maximum of 20. While you're wearing medium armor, you can add 3 rather than 2 to your armor class if you have a dexterity of 16 or higher. So this is going to put our dexterity up to 20. If we still have that scale mail, it's going to bring our AC up to 17. If we have some half plate, it'll instead be 8. Add Shield of Faith and Defensive Duelist, and we can potentially bring that armor class up to 24. Now, we're going to head back into Druid for a few levels to increase the temporary hit points of our symbiotic entity and pick up one very specific spell. Druid levels 5 through 7 is going to give us Wild Resurgence, Fungal Infestation, Elemental Fury, and Fount of Moonlight. Wild Resurgence is a nice ability that lets us swap spell slots for wild-shaped charges. Since each wild-shaped charge for us is equivalent to 20 temporary hit points and an extra 1d6 on all of our weapon attacks, this is a pretty good trade. Druid level 6 gets us a subclass feature, Fungal Infestation. At 6th level, your spores gain the ability to infest a corpse and animate it. If a beast or humanoid that is small or medium dies within 10 feet of you, you can use your reaction to animate it, causing it to stand up immediately with 1 hit point. The creature uses the zombie stat block in the monster manual. It remains animated for 1 hour, after which time it collapses and dies. In combat, the zombie's turn comes immediately after yours. It obeys your mental commands, and the only action it can take is the attack action, making 1 melee attack. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier, minimum of once, and you regain all expended uses of it when you finish a long rest. At this point, we also have the Animate Dead spell from our subclass, so we can potentially start raising ourselves a little undead army. Finally, character level 7, we're going to get Elemental Fury, which lets us choose either potent spell casting or primal strikes. We're going to be going with primal strikes. Once on each of your turns, when you hit a creature with an attack roll, using either a weapon or a beast form attack in wild shape, you can cause the target to take an extra 1d6 cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage. Choose when you hit. We're going to take all the extra melee damage we can get, so we like this. For a death/plague knight, I think cold is the most on brand for us, but if you know what your target's resistances or vulnerabilities are, then choose that damage type accordingly. Lastly, this level is also going to get us 4th level spell slots, so let's pick up a spell that increases our melee damage even further, Fount of Moonlight. This spell adds 2d6 radiant damage to all of our attacks. It also gives us resistance to radiant damage, and lets us attempt to blind a creature within 60 feet of us who damages us, as a reaction. Our spell save is abysmally low thanks to the 13 wisdom, but the resistance and the extra damage on hit is really what we want this spell for. If your table plays with Conjure Minor Elementals, you can take it instead for an extra 2d8 damage on hit, but I don't really like that spell. I think it's overpowered. I think it's a typo. I don't want to play with it until, there's an errata or something. Now, we're going to head back to Fighter for the majority of the rest of this build to grab some more ability score improvements, another maneuver, and eventually that sweet extra attack 2. Fighter levels 7 through 12 is going to net us an ability score improvement, tactical master feature, improved combat superiority, 2 extra attacks, and an ability score improvement. So fighter level 7 gets us another superiority die for 5 total, and a maneuver. From here, I would take menacing attack. When you hit a creature with an attack roll, you can expend 1 superiority die to attempt to frighten the target. Add the superiority die to the attack's damage roll. Target must succeed on a wisdom saving throw, or have the frightened condition until the end of your next turn. At this point, we're a dual-wielding Goliath, either enlarged to huge sizes or wreathed in moonlight. We have an aura of necrotic spores, and we shrug off most damage that comes our way. We are almost like a horror movie antagonist, so that's pretty frightening. Might as well get a maneuver that reflects that, you know? Fighter level 8 gets us another ability score improvement. Let's grab Warcaster to make sure we don't lose concentration on these buff spells that we're using. You have advantage on Constitution saving throws you make to maintain concentration. When a creature provokes an opportunity attack from you, you can replace the attack with the casting of a spell. The spell must have a casting time of 1 action and must target only that creature. You can perform the somatic components of spells even when you have weapons or a shield in one or both hands. Advantage and proficiency is nice. We probably won't lose that concentration too much. Also, we can increase our wisdom to 14 with this feat to get that +2 modifier. Finally, fighter level 9 gets us tactical mind. This lets us swap the weapon mastery we utilize on an attack for either sap, slow, or push. I really like sap. The disadvantage on a single attack against you is pretty much the only defensive mastery property, and since we don't want to get hit and lose our temporary hit points, it's definitely worth using. Fighter level 10 increases our superiority die up to d10s, so we're dealing more damage now. It also nets us an extra maneuver. I would grab Trip Attack. When you hit a creature with an attack roll using a weapon or an unarmed strike, you can expend 1 superiority die and add the die to the attack roll's damage, and add the die to the attack's damage roll. If the target is large or smaller, it must succeed on a strength saving throw or have the prone condition. It's really too bad that this doesn't scale with our size. If it said something like, if the target is no more than 1 size larger than you, it'd be really cool since we can become huge. Regardless, it only works on large or smaller creatures, so even if we're huge, we still can't knock over anything our size. But either way, it still adds the superiority die to the damage, so I like that. And next, character level 18 gets us 2 extra attacks. That's 3 attacks on the action, 4, including Nick, and then our dual wielder feat, bonus action attack, for a total of 5 attacks per turn. Then if we action surge, we'll get another 3 on top of that, for a total of 8 attacks per turn. With Symbiotic Entity and Fount of Moonlight active, that's going to be 4d6 plus 5 damage per attack. Additionally, we can use a maneuver to add 1d10 to any of those. And our Primal Strikes from Druid lets us add 1d8 elemental damage to one of those attacks. That could potentially be, if we burn a lot of resources, 20d6, 5d10, and 1d8 plus 25 damage. And then again, if we decide to action surge, we can make 3 more attacks, throwing in an additional 12d6 plus 15. Assuming everything hits, that's an average of 184 damage. This is character level 18, so that much damage makes sense, but it's still fun to see how it all comes together at the end. Now, for our last 2 levels, Fighter level 12 and Druid level 8, these are both going to net us an ability score improvement. And since we are now going to be level 19 with that Fighter level 12, we can get epic boons, so we're going to pick up 2 of those. At level 19, we're going to grab the boon of Irresistible Offense. Increase your strength or dexterity score by 1 to a maximum of 30. The bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage you deal always ignores resistance. When you roll a 20 on the d20 for an attack roll, you can deal extra damage to the target equal to the ability score increased by this feat. The extra damage's type is the same as the attack's damage. We're going to bump our dexterity up to 21. A lot of our damage is radiant and necrotic, so ignoring the resistance is only half useful for us, but an additional 21 damage on every crit is really nice. And we're making 5 attacks per turn, potentially 8 with action surge. Thanks to the Vex property, a good deal of those attacks will be at advantage, so critical hits are pretty likely. And at level 20, we're going to grab the boon of Combat Prowess. Increase one ability score of your choice by 1 to a maximum of 30. When you miss an attack roll, you can hit instead. Once you use this benefit, you cannot use it again until the start of your next turn. Bump our dexterity up to 22 with this feat, giving us the +6 modifier. Since our attacks are now dealing 4d6 plus 6, or more with maneuvers and Primal Strike, it's going to pay to make sure that they hit. So 1 free hit per round is pretty great. If you use that on your first attack, that will then activate Vex, so the rest of your attacks will be at advantage as long as you line up those short sword hits the correct way. And that's the build. So I'm really excited to play this character. We're starting the campaign tonight, so it'll be like, 12 hours or so after I post this video, I'll be sitting down to try this character out for the first time. I've always loved the aesthetic of a Death Knight, and with the extra necrotic damage and the animate dead capability here, this fits very, very well. Making a bunch of attacks is always fun, but I would say my favorite part of this build is the defensive capabilities. Thanks to Stone's Endurance, Absorb Elements, and Defensive Duelist, we're always going to have a response when something damages us. And we definitely need it here, because a good chunk of our damage relies on keeping those temporary hit points from symbiotic entity around. This creates a fun sort of mini game to play in combat, where you're always going to be tracking your temporary hit points and deciding what reaction to use when you take damage. Then if you still have the temporary hit points on your turn, you can dump some features in to maximize your damage, action surge for some additional attacks, precision attack to make sure they land, tripping, menacing, and disarming for extra damage. It's really about taking advantage of when you can inflict your extra damage. The main drawback for me with this build is how long it takes to get extra attack. We're not getting it until character level 9. The Nick Mastery is going to help offset that. If waiting that long isn't going to work for you, you can always take the Dual Wielder feat at level 4 instead of the Defensive Duelist feat. That'll be character level 5. So then you'll be able to make 2 attacks with your action and 1 with your bonus action. So it's still 3 per turn. It's going to feel like getting extra attack. And then just take Defensive Duelist at fighter level 4, character level 8. All in all, this is going to be a really fun build for anybody who enjoys the classic fighter gameplay, but with a little bit of added flair with the spellcasting and the Plague/Death Knight aesthetic. Thanks for checking out the video. Let me know what you think of the build in the comments down below. I'd really love to hear some of you guys' feedback, since I'll actually be playing this one at the table. I'm really excited to see how it works. I'm hoping we have enough defenses to keep those temporary hit points around, but it's going to be a bit of a juggling act, so we'll see how it goes. Come back next week for another original character build. Next week, I'm going to make a build based on a request from one of the channel's viewers. We're making Ashitaka from Princess Mononoke, a tribal warrior cursed by a demon, wielding bow, blade, and the enhanced strength of his curse mark. Thanks for checking out this video, and I'll see y'all next week.